Hello there, I'm Simon Colton and I'm associated with the MetaMakers Institute here at Falmouth University. I'm also part of the Goldsmiths Computational Creativity Group, and I'm a co-founder of our new startup Imaginative AI Limited, and the work here has been done at all three of these places. I'm going to be talking today about machine learning based style transfer for game assets, and I should point out that this is hilariously speculative and preliminary work, so you have been warned. This is all within the context of the Painting Full project. This is an ancient project going back to before some of you were born, I'm sure, 17 years at least. The aim of the project is for the software to be taken seriously as a creative artist in its own right one day. So the idea is that when I die, no one will notice or care because the Painting Full will carry on producing wonderful pictures in interesting ways. Over the years, it's involved all sorts of computer science techniques, artificial intelligence, graphics, machine vision, natural language processing, machine learning, you name it, it's gone in there. And the focus has always been on the cognitive aspects of the painting process rather than the physical ones. To me, painting is 99% a cognitive act and 1% making marks on a canvas, which is quite the opposite to the approach that's been taken in graphics, which is why I think of painting as an AI project. Recently, I've been trying to bring together the Painting Full and my work on video game design and asking the following questions. What would it mean for the Painting Full to become an art director for a video game design project? How could I make this happen with the technology roadmap? And specifically, how would machine learning and style transfer fit into this approach? The application here is to automatic whole game generation as per the Angelina system from Michael Cook, and to fluidic games, which are casual creators for game design where having fun making games is really the main intent. So in a very preliminary way, I looked up what is an art director at a game studio, and the first response from Google says that basically the art director is in charge of making the game fit into the creative director's vision, in particular taking on the responsibility for the aesthetics of the finished game. So in this scenario, the user is going to act as the creative director, and the Painting Full will be the art director, for now just taking on the aesthetics. I want it to expand into taking on more interesting and creative parts of the game design process later on, but for now it's just aesthetics. So two of a number of possible approaches which have already had machine learning based approaches applied to them within the Painting Full project are as follows. So you could say as creative director, make my game look like make my game look like a particular adjective or an emotion. So make my game look sad, or make my game look like wood. That would be the texture. Make my game look like wood, or make my game look like water, or make my game look like it was made by Picasso, or make my game look like it was made by Cézanne. There are slightly different approaches to each of those. The first one, getting adjectives and emotions out, can be done with Painting Full's existing techniques, and the second one, textures and artists, can be done with style transfer, and I'll be talking about that at the second half of the talk. Just to very briefly cover what the Painting Full can currently do. Well, it has a way of painting paint regions which is parameterized into 57 settings, including bristle, color variance, things like tapering, graininess, bristle size, dispersion, smudging, and so on. And I generated 1,200 of these painting styles by randomly sampling the space of these, and then I enabled paint regions to be layered up with 5 layers in order to produce paintings, and then painted the same picture of a flower over and over again in these 1,200 different painting styles. And for each style I applied 65 pre-trained neural networks, courtesy of Dan Ventura and the team over in Brigham Young in the States. And for each of the neural networks applied to each of the styles, I recorded the output from the neural net as part of a vision profile, machine vision profile. Here are some of the styles that the Painting Full can produce. These are ones of the 1,200, and you can see there's quite a range from quite sketchy to quite fleshed out. and really quite a lot going on there. For each of these styles, there are these 65 numbers calculated, which gives you a vision profile. You probably can't see the words and numbers there, but this says that that particular style for that flower scores very highly for psychedelic, that's 0.47, and very low for things like, looking for one here, fiery. Scores 0.177 for fiery, so that is quite a psychedelic but not a very fiery painting style. And of course that could be applied to in-game assets. I haven't done that yet, but I certainly intend to. But I'm going to move on now to generative adversarial networks, because they are really a very exciting part of the AI makeup over the last few years, and I've been having a lot of fun applying them to these game assets. So the setup that I used was basically to get hold of software called Neural Style from Justin Johnson. The GitHub URL is there if you want to track this down yourself. What happens here is that there are two models learned for a pair of images. One is an image for style, which wants to be transferred onto the other image, which is content. So a model for style and a model for content are learned, and then with this lovely arithmetic you can use, they're applied to each other, and an image filtered version where the style has been transferred onto the content is produced, and the results are really remarkably good. I used the default settings because I played around, but they didn't change much, and I stopped after 500 iterations because I didn't see much of an improvement after that. Now this is incredibly slow on a CPU. To produce even very small images can take 30 minutes or more, and I didn't have access to a GPU cluster, so this was painful work. In principle, it's really easy to get these things to work. You just need a style image and a content image. In practice, it took me half a day to set up all this Torch and Python and Lua and all that command line loveliness on my laptop, and it is really far too painful at the moment. There are web implementations which are not parameterizable, which are too easy, and really there's a middle ground which is missing. That all said, I did manage to get some styles transferred. I'm working in the domain of shoot-em-ups, and so there's lots of spaceships knocking around, and these are the kind of results you can produce. On the left there is an image of wood applied to the starship, which is on the far right there, and you can see it's produced wood. The middle row are where you transfer the color as well as the texture, and the bottom row is where you keep the texture, you keep the color of the original content image and you transfer over the texture only. And the results are really quite good. The middle one is an abstract one which makes things look like they're underwater, and the one on the right is crumpled paper. I was looking to see whether I could make games look like they've been handcrafted, and I thought a crumpled paper would look good. And you can imagine the painting fool being used as an art director, and the creative director, which is you, saying, make my game look like it's made out of wood. And you apply this style and you should get a wooden looking game. Rob Saunders has very kindly, on his GPU cluster, the Cornwall supercomputer as we call it, has implemented Keras in TensorFlow and used that to apply style transfer with these textured images. Some of them are artistic and some of them are from natural photos of things like rust and tiles, and you can see that it has transferred over these styles. It looks like they really have been created to be textured in that way. So you can get textures applied to your game assets. Another thing you can do is do Pastiche. I'm not a big fan of Pastiche in the arts, but why not when you're making games? And I happened to find a particularly beautiful set of images in The Guardian by this writer, Gaith Abdul Ahad. He's a war correspondent working in Syria, and he also does pen and ink, beautiful pen and ink paintings of war-torn Syria. And I happened to be working in neural nets when I read this, and I asked myself, well, can I transfer his style over to games? And Rob's approach at the top there and mine at the bottom show that you are picking up some of that style. They don't look like they've been painted as pen and ink drawings, but you've certainly got an influence from his style there. More styles, again, courtesy of Rob. I don't know where all of these images came from, the styles. I'm pretty sure it's Hokusai on the left and Georgia O'Keeffe on the left at the bottom. And in each case you can see that the style transfers work. That's not surprising. We know that style transfer does work, and is surprising only really in the fact that it works for these very simple sprites that you get in games. I wasn't expecting things like sprites which are very simple graphics to pick up so much of the texture and look so sophisticated. Rob's worked on the alpha channel to try and reduce the bleed, but there's still some more work to be done there. So that's another thing you can do. You can do pastiches with games. A third thing you can do with style transfer is to use them to change the look of the game for narrative points. So imagine that your spaceship dives down under the water. You can say to the painting tool, make my game look like it's underwater, and it will find an underwater image and apply the style as it's done here. Works very well. Or you might have a big crash and you might want to say, make my game look like the whole thing is on fire. And you can take an image. I've taken a fractal image here rather than a picture of natural fire, although that works perfectly well as well. I wanted to see where the style from an already abstract artwork transfers over, and it does very well. And then when your spaceship has burned out, you can similarly apply a transfer from a bit of charcoal or a burnt bit of wood. And the top one there is mine and the bottom one there is Rob's. Two different looking burned out ships, which shows you that there's a range of things you can generate from the same style image. So you could imagine games having these plot points where the look of the game changes using style transfer as well. So I can now give you a demo of how these styles transfer over to actual games. This is work that I've been doing for Imaginative AI, our new company, and we're setting this up as a social network for games. This is a prototype of something called Ludando, and the idea is that you make and share games just the same way that you make and share videos, and in such an easy way that it feels casual to do so. I've been working on a fluidic game, which is a parameterized game with a lovely user interface which makes it fun and interesting to just make choices to make your game. So games in this are really just points in a space, and the games here are in a space which covers shoot 'em ups, driving games and infinite runners. There's a lovely fluid space there. And I wanted to see whether it would be possible to say, make my game look like everything is on fire with that style image of the fractal, make my game look like it's made of wood with a wood image there, and make my game look like it's by this particular artist who I really like. And so here is the demo. The original game, I just chose arbitrary textures really to get what looks to me as to be a quite nice game. It's a shoot 'em up, so you have to fire at the green bad guys. You have to avoid the walls of the road that you're on. In the bottom right is the controller where you are changing the orientation of the spaceship, and you drag the spaceship around and you can fire your laser and so forth. So it's a classic kind of shoot 'em up on a bit of a road. So here is the second version where I said, hey Siri, make my game look like it's made of wood. Sadly Siri didn't do it. It took me hours on a CPU. But here is the result. You can see that the texture has been transferred. It does look like it's made of wood to some extent. You kind of expect these things to make wooden knocking sounds. Particularly happy with the flowers in the terrain foreground. They're quite clearly there and have been transferred over. So I'm fairly happy with the result for make my game look like it's made of wood. It shows a lot of promise. The second style that I wanted to transfer was make my game look like it's on fire. Using this fractal image. The results here were less satisfying. A number of things have gone wrong really. Certainly you can no longer see the flowers in the foreground. You can just about make them out, but they're not great. It's a bit too cluttered. It's much of a muchness, a bit too visually similar across all of the three levels. And you can see there's issues with tiling, which I'll come back to in a second. And I wouldn't say that this is a version of my game which looks like it's on fire. Maybe I should have used a fire image. I'll try that again. And the final style transferred is this artist, the war correspondent, and I think that the game looks influenced by him. It doesn't look like it's been sketched with pen and ink, but I would be happy with that to say that it is actually a stylized image in the style of Gaith Abdul Ahad. I do like the sketchiness of the flowers which have been picked up, the complexity coming out there. I think overall it works pretty well as a styled game. So there are some issues which you can see. There's beautiful bleeding of the sprite, or the style transfer sprite into the surrounding image, and no amount of clever graphics is going to properly extract it. So we're going to have to build neural network models which deal with RGBA inputs rather than RGB, and Rob and I have been talking about that already. There are issues with tiles. This is an issue with graphic design in general, not just machine learned graphic design. But your beautifully seamless tiles for the backgrounds of games get altered by the image filter, and I think the solution there is to construct new tiles out of filtered objects, and then things will go back to being seamless with the style transferred. And there is this issue with clutter, and style. The style overwhelming the underlying content, so you can't quite see the content coming through. And I think the painting tool will have to have some techniques for composition at different scales, using different shading, and allowing, through transparency, allowing the content to come through more. Interesting future work, and I really do think this is going to go a long way. So to conclude, yeah, it's not rocket science. I know this is just image filtering. It is just style transfer, and every man and his dog has been doing it. But I just would like to point out how incredibly easy it is. All you need to make your game look like wood is a picture of a bit of wood. And I really do think the painting tool will be able to take verbal or written instructions like make my game look like it's underwater. The quality of the images can be surprisingly high. Sometimes they're disappointing, but most of the time, even for just very basic sprites, a lot of the style is transferred over and it looks beautiful. And the plan would be to basically allow people with our casual creator for these shoot 'em ups to type in a word like bricks or like concrete, and not have pre-trained networks. The software will go off, it will do an image search online, bring back a representative image of, let's say, concrete, learn a model to transfer the style with, and hey presto, your game will look like it's made of concrete. And then I think the painting tool will move on to more interesting uses of neural networks. There's amazing work being done on text to image, deep neural networks there. So I think the software will be able to say, make my game about a bird with a red head and black legs, and imagined birds will be made like that, hallucinated birds I would call them. And I want the painting tool to go past just applying the aesthetics given to it by the creative director, and to invent its own styles for games. It's already got lots of techniques for doing that, which I've explored myself, but I am interested in using these so-called creative adversarial networks. They look very promising. They basically learn over various styles in order to produce a style which looks nothing like any of them, which is the kind of thing I've done in the past, but not, I think, to the same kind of quality standard. So thanks for listening. I'm available on Twitter at Simon G. Colton. The G stands for Geronimo. And if there are any questions on chat, I'm happy to answer them right now. Thank you.